Hi, good morning. All right, everybody doing all right this morning, I hope, right? Right awake, ready to go? All the coffee I didn't get any coffee, so I'm gonna rely on your energy this morning, if that sounds fair. Okay, so first of all, how many people here play Dungeons and Dragons, just so I know? Okay, not as many as I'd hoped, but hopefully we'll turn you all into geeks too. All right, so my name is Tara. I like to tell people that I am a recovering automation developer. Basically, that means I've been an SDET for the last 10 years before I got into developer relations. I have a huge focus on quality. I think once you're an SDET, you're always an SDET, thus the recovering part, one day at a time. I do have dual degrees, so one in mathematics, one in computer science, so I am completely and totally a nerd. And I've been playing D&D for long before that. I won't tell you how long and age myself. But now I work on the developer relations side doing educational content, teaching people how to implement DevOps and focus on quality in their end products. So today, I'd like to take you on a little quest about how we're going to optimize that team performance and culture to make DevOps actually work for ourselves. Of course, that comes down to diversity and hopefully software quality, but that might be my bias talking. We'll talk a little bit about questing for root cause analysis, being an ally for QA, and then if we've got time left over, we'll do a little bit of Q&A. All right, so big question in the room, what does Dungeons and Dragons have to do with DevOps, right? So to help answer that question, first we have to understand a little bit about D&D. Well, it's a tabletop game that started back in 1974. I'm not quite that old, but I feel like I've been playing it that long. It's great because you can play it with just a rule book, a writing utensil, some paper, and dice. You don't need anything terribly special. The premise is an open world where the goal of the game is to tell a collaborative story. I've been a fan of the game for years because of the excitement of tackling big problems, and during the quarantine, it was the only way to connect with people. D&D has made a lasting impression over the last 50 years, and I think that even if you haven't played the game directly, you've probably seen its influence in other things. D&D has showed up in things like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Stranger Things. A lot of the games that we play nowadays are based on that same rule set of classes and abilities. So if you've played Pokemon, Final Fantasy, World of Warcraft, those all directly come from the D&D world. But what does that have to do with DevOps? Well, let's take a look. An adventuring party in Dungeons and Dragons is a group of people made up from different backgrounds and different skill sets with the purpose of accomplishing a goal. DevOps teams are a group of people gathered from different backgrounds and skill sets with the purpose of accomplishing a goal. Hopefully that sounds familiar. Each D&D character at the table is unique. We have a backstory and experiences that belong to only that character. A well-written character has fears and goals, just as unique as the members of your DevOps teams. So, how do we use that information to help us optimize our team performance and culture? Well, most of the time, we don't get to choose our teams. We can choose how we interact with them, however. In D&D, teams are rarely, honestly, if ever, homogeneous. Instead, you see characters from all walks of life and backgrounds locked together in this quest. It might be a little bit more extreme in D&D since I can't remember the last time I saw a purple team member from the Nine Hells, but I can think of a few people that have come to mind with that description. How many people here have worked with somebody that just seemed like they were out to get you every step of the way? At least a couple of you, probably more if we're being honest. Well, who knows? Maybe they were out to get you, but maybe we just come from different alignments. Alignment is often in the eye of the beholder. It's rare that villains actually see themselves and are out trying to be the bad guy. Um, so, where do you fit into this grid, right? Are you the person who follows every rule to get things done because that's what's expected of you? Or are you the person who likes to watch the world burn just to see what happens? No evildoers in here? Okay. It's human nature to try to fit people into these boxes, right? So when we break everything up into this grid, it becomes very cut and dry. You're evil or you're good. You follow the rules or you don't. But none of us are that black and white. I like to think of certain characters as landmarks on more of a sliding grid, right? So you get a lot more space when you look at it from a graph point of view. Captain America always followed the rules, regardless of what they were, for the good of others. Sometimes to a fault. But in the MCU, did he stay that way, right? His character evolved. The Joker admitted to being destructive and chaotic for the pure joy of watching the train wreck. But he also felt like he was bringing necessary balance to Batman. So was he really evil? Right? What about when you think of other characters? Thanos, Frodo Baggins, your project manager. Let me tell you a D&D story real quick. I like to call it the story of the greedy wizard. This was a wizard that had no business being in our party. He was highly educated, rich, kind of snobby. Nobody really knew why he ended up in a tavern with a bunch of adventurers, right? Seems a little out of place. But this greedy wizard took every resource for himself, hid information from the party, and just kind of derailed the whole process. Well, as it comes to find out, this wizard was paying a ransom to keep his daughters safe. That's why he joined the party, to try to make more money. Knowing that background story made us all stop and rethink, okay, maybe he's not the bad guy. Let's go get the actual bad guy, right? When I worked for a company that was taking their old 90s style desktop application into the world of web-based, we had one person on our team that felt like they were diverting everything the same way. This was a person who was highly educated, had been with the product from the ground up on the original implementations. They had all the system knowledge. They knew all of the ins and outs. But every step of the way, they were combative, did not want to help, hid information from the party. Now, in both cases, these people seemed to be the bad guy. But it turns out in my DevOps team, this person had been told that when the transition to web-based was going to take place, their desktop application team would cease to exist. Automatically puts you on the defensive, right? And so all of a sudden, that person that's just kind of a PITA, all of a sudden, you kind of understand where they're coming from. So in both cases, both team members pulled their weight and got the work done that they had to do. And both were even valuable members of our team. They were just reacting to something that was unjust. And we didn't have the full information to understand where they were coming from. That's the power of storytelling. Little misconceptions that lead to big issues, both in DevOps teams and our D&D storylines. And most of the time, the person that seems like the most disagreeable person in a DevOps team is the person with the most to lose. Change is hard, right? And we've all gone through a lot of changes, and change fatigue is real. I challenge each one of you, though, when you come across that roadblock with your team, to look deeper at the backstory. Maybe that person actually is the hero in disguise. Or open up about your story. You might be the person that's causing that roadblock. Never in this group, though, right? Okay. So along with different alignments and different personality types, The cast of characters assembled in both D&D and DevOps come from a variety of archetypes. We've got project managers and business analysts and developers and testers and designers, and all of us have to work together towards the same goal. Each person has a skill set that they are the most proficient at. One might be a database guru, or you know that person on your team that's just like really good at JavaScript for no reason? Archetypes in D&D aren't so different. Every character has a set of traits that they rely on to help them do their job, right? For D&D, it might be a favorite armor, a weapon, their favorite environment to do battle in. But I would say that our DevOps team members have the same thing, right? We all have our favorite tools, our favorite programming languages, our ideal work environment, whether we want quiet or people around us. My favorite thing about D&D is that all these different personalities and motivations get to actively be involved in creating that story. After rolling for initiative, everyone goes around in a turn and explains what their character is doing. So what do, right? Each turn you have to decide what actions you're going to take, where to move, how to react. And each turn builds the story, creating an epic battle or an intense interrogation. One of the best ways to build on the story is using a trick from improv. It's the yes and, a tactic that helps you acknowledge what is going on and then decide what's happening with that knowledge. So for example, if my bard says, I'm going to seduce the guard, I might say, yeah, and I'll be your wingman, right? If my dev tells me that they're working on a feature, I might say, yeah, and I'll have those test cases ready for you when you need them. There are a couple of actions in D&D and DevOps that I take fairly often. One is the ready action. It works kind of like an if-then statement. If the goblin steps on the trapdoor, then I'm going to pull the lever, right? Makes sense. It delays my action this turn until something happens, and it becomes my action next turn. The other one that I take all the time is the help action. It allows my character to give advantage to another player by helping them possibly succeed. When the ranger shoots, I'm going to try to distract their target. My party member gets to use the higher of 2 rolls. Then you just have to roll the dice and live with the consequences. So this is how I view our daily stand-ups and our meetings. You're taking turns in battle, and sometimes that means you're attacking the problem. Sometimes it means you need to assist your party members. As a QA, I often have to ready to test whenever I'm needed. I can still move forward on other things. I can move forward on automation or take a bonus action and provide help to a team member. Some days are just better than others, though. The dice are in your favor. And some days, everything that can go wrong will. But D&D isn't about blame, unless you're blaming your dice. It's about working together and using your skills to the best of your ability to create a great story. In DevOps teams, if your team members are struggling, you can help give people a pep talk, advice, or work on a problem. And DevOps is about your team using its skills to the best of their ability to create a great piece of software. We have to actively engage by planning and creating strategy for everything to run smoothly. And I don't think that means meetings. God knows we get enough of those, right? Everybody here's favorite activity of the day is a meeting? Shockingly, no. We spend way too much time in meetings anyway. A study from Atlassian shows that almost half of respondents say that meetings are the #1 time waster. Who here is shocked? That's what I thought. Not a single person. It's often only one person at a meeting that's speaking up. Everybody else is zoned out on Zoom or just doing whatever else they're doing in the background. I like to check my email at that point in time, catch up on those Slack messages. Right? In fact, that same study from Atlassian showed that almost three-fourths of people admitted that they were doing other things. Some of those things that they admitted to are shocking. They're out grocery shopping. They're playing video games, walking the dog. I think the reason that most people are willing to spend 30 minutes or not willing to spend 30 minutes in a meeting, but fully love playing 8 hours in a gaming session, is because you're actively participating in that gaming session, right? So one of the things I've done is if my meeting's going downhill and nobody's talking and I feel like everybody's zoned out, I make everybody roll for initiative. Right? That puts everybody in a speaking order. None of that popcorn or suddenly hearing your name and going, oh my God, what did I miss that was important? No one becomes uncomfortable because they don't know when it's their turn to talk or how to interject that thought that they're having, because you're in order. You have a process to go through to get everybody involved. It allows us to speak up, to make strategic moves instead of just blindly following along. And a great strategy can help keep a battle moving forward. Ooh, one more click, there we go. And D&D takes a lot of strategy, right? Part of that strategy is just planning around each other's strengths and weaknesses. You have to know what your character is capable of. It also takes figuring out the pace that each person can move at, right? A little halfling is not going to move at the same speed as a half giant. Nobody can. In D&D, we call it movement, but in DevOps, we might call it sprint points or stories or capacity or velocity or any other buzzword that you probably hate hearing. Gives you a little bit of PTSD. The pace setter in DevOps is your team member that might have a smaller team to work with, fewer personnel, or it might be the person on your team with the least amount of experience. How many people here have heard that testing is the bottleneck before release? Right? And I get it, but I can say that typically I'm one party member to the 6 or 7 developers that I'm working with. And so naturally, I'm not going to move as fast as they are. Teams can't always just add more people, right? We all have budgets. Usually it goes the other direction, especially here lately. We're all losing people. And a team's velocity doesn't just affect budgets, but it affects our end users and the quality that we're releasing out into the world. What can we do to not sacrifice that quality? Well, certain testing tasks take up a lot of time. Out of a 2-week sprint, almost 2 days are just setting up testing environments, data, and mocks. It takes another 3 or 4 days to complete any manual tests, and 2 to 3 days of just analysis of what came out of those. Automation can help speed things up. That's why I got into software or to automation development. But it comes with its own payout, right? There's a lot of maintenance and development that goes into those that typically don't get considered as part of your testing time. But like every turn in D&D, each sprint is a new chance to just move forward. Good communication will always be the foundation of a strong team. So with the right plan and a good strategy, a team can hopefully accomplish their goals. So the key takeaway here, open lines of communication can foster better cooperation and maybe even slightly faster testing cycles. So what else do we do to ensure good communication? Well, make sure all the voices on your team are heard and present. Can't tell you how many meetings I have not gone to because I am just QA. One of the easiest ways to shift your testing left is to bring a tester into the conversation earlier. Let them know about your design and what they think they might foresee coming out of that, right? Just asking a few questions. We all have those skills and stats to bring to the table that are unique to our characters. A real-life human character. Ours aren't as cut and dry as D&D, right? They're not dice and attached to numeric values. They're not as transparent as a character sheet. But they are quantifiable. D&D characters have, in fact, exactly 6 stats that help determine how easily they can succeed at any given task. I like to refer to them as the tomato theory. Every character gets a bonus on these stats based on their class, race, and the skills they have as they level up. When you talk about stats, it's easy to see what might be beneficial when you're fighting your way through a dungeon or crawling somewhere through for loot. Right? Dexterity makes sense. You got to be able to dodge. Wisdom in battle is important. But do you really need charisma? Right? I mean, like, does the person that you're fighting and throwing a fireball at need to like you? For anybody who read this last line, though, and thinks that tomato-based fruit is just salsa, have you played a bard before? High charisma levels. Just because you have a low score doesn't mean you're going to fail at something. And just because you have a high score doesn't mean you're going to automatically succeed. Let's see. Have you ever seen somebody that is like super strong trying to open a pickle jar and they just can't get it open, right? And then somebody will walk up and do that like tap tap thing on the counter and it pops right open, right? Sometimes it takes a village. We need our party members. And it takes that variety of skills to tackle a problem, and we don't have to do it alone. You never go into D&D with into a D&D battle with just a group of healers, right? Could they get it done? Sure, eventually, but at what cost, right? It might take every spell slot they have. They may come out bloody and bruised and their armor beyond repair. What armor they have. Could you have a team of full stack developers succeed? Yeah, eventually, but at what cost? Are they going to have more bugs? Are they going to have UI issues? Are they going to meet deadlines? There's a reason that both D&D and software development teams take a full team of different specialties and experiences. Just like our D&D counterparts, each one of us has that unique backstory and our skills and our passion projects that make us uniquely capable of doing the things that we do. Each skill and specialty and experience manifests just for you. And it's okay to not know how to do something, right? None of us in here expect to know how to do everything, even if some of our team members and bosses might think that we should. But we have a team for that. So when I don't know how to do something, I'm going to go ask somebody that does. When I first got into software, I was coming from the healthcare world. I had worked processing insurance claims. There's a reason I left healthcare. But it was that experience that got me my first software gig. I had been on the end user side of this software. I had spent time using this software. So even though I didn't really have any experience as a developer or a tester that I could put on my resume, I knew this software inside and out. I knew what bugs existed. I knew what workarounds I had to use every day. And let me tell you, some of those conversations were not comfortable to have. Everybody gets a little defensive of their work, right? We're proud of the stuff that we do. When those conversations don't go smoothly, and we get maybe a little defensive and a little heated, what do? Well, we've got to take a step back, take a breath. I haven't met a single tester that sits at their computer and rubs their hands together and cackles like an evil villain every time they log a bug, right? We do sometimes like to give that impression, but we don't actually do it. So those conversations where I've had to defend a bug that I've logged are excruciating because, well, maybe you just don't know what it was doing, or maybe you don't understand what we were going for here. Sometimes it's just a matter of pride. As my rogue character, that purple chick that keeps popping up, she was a rogue. And let me tell you, worst rogue on the planet. All right? Bull in a china shop level of stealth. But any time that my team members relied on me to do something, we had to figure out a way to make it work. We had to have those conversations of, look, We know you can't roll stealth and get in there. What else you got? Right? This civil discourse helped us move forward and come up with new strategies. And it became apparent that our characters and players alike had varying viewpoints on how to do those things. Our experiences simply made us see things differently. Whether we're debating in-game mechanics or how to gather information, the more often we discuss these things, it falls down to that practice makes perfect. In a 2014 report for Scientific American, Columbia professor Catherine W. Phillips found that the very act of interacting with a diverse group of people improves performance because, and here's the quote, it forces group members to prepare better, to anticipate alternative viewpoints, and to expect that reaching consensus is going to take effort. This is something that D&D is actually known for. Psychologists have started using this tool with people, especially of younger generations that are having social difficulties, to build up those exact skills. There you go. And in a world of fantasy, you can be as creative as you like. There's no limits based on your race or gender or economic status or religion. Somehow it is perfectly logical for team members from completely different planes of existence to be on the same team. But that means we all have our blind spots, right? Things that might never cross our mind because it's never impacted us before. So to avoid writing bias into our software, it takes a little bit of diversity to overcome it all. At my alma mater, they recently built an entirely new building. When it was all done, they realized that the handicap doors swung the wrong direction. It was actually harder for people in a wheelchair to get into the building. And it was purely because they never took the time to ask. They never had anybody that'd been in a wheelchair on their team. So if we can't ensure that we're asking the right people, we have to make sure that we are at least reaching out for more information. So when you come across things that you don't know how to do, or part of the conversation that you want everybody to speak up at, we have to make sure that they're present and accounted for. And you find that person that knows their skills the best. So if I find a scroll that's in Elvish and I don't speak Elvish, probably gonna ask the elf what it says, right? If I wanna figure out the best architecture for JSON response coming back, I'm going to ask the front-end dev that has to actually use it. And if you've ever read any of the text, the alt text for the James Webb Telescope images, those are accessibility goals, right? Those things are like poetry. And so people that are using technology that helps us get through those disabilities, probably with those images have it better than those of us that don't use screen readers, honestly. So applying this concept to DevOps is just as easy as looking around at your team and asking which voice is missing. What should you do if part of your team that might be helpful is left out of a meeting? Nothing? All right, well, hint, it's usually QA, although that might be my bias talking. And they've probably, whoever it is, has probably already been thinking about the problem at their desk, in their cubicle, on their walks in the evenings. So if you need a second set of eyes on something, instead of asking the person who looks and thinks like you, try asking somebody who typically disagrees with you. Somebody that's gonna argue with you. Because it's in those arguments and those disagreements that we have to defend our, honor, and we might see a different viewpoint. Like having a rubber duck that actually talks back to you. As devs, we catch on to things quickly. And that means we give ourselves back precious time to move on to the next thing that's important. So regardless of how well our teams have worked together and how well we've planned, there are always going to be challenges, right? We're not just our character sheets, we are actually human. And these challenges in software development usually come from unforeseen bugs. Tiny little glitches in logic or race events that make you question all of your life choices. My D&D party had spent months on different adventures, but no matter what we were undertaking, it seemed like there was always this guy around every corner, right? So imagine every session, regardless of where you are or what you're trying to do, running into hordes of undead. It took far longer than I would like any of us to admit that they had to be coming from somewhere. Well, it turns out when the team was investigating and exploring different places and gathering information, we finally found the root cause of our problems. Somewhere along the lines, we had pissed off a necromancer. And so he was sending undead after us. So if that feels familiar to anybody, you've probably done some bug hunting of that thing that you've solved 100 times, but keeps popping back up over and over and over again. So taking a lesson from D&D, our DevOps team has the perfect opportunity to mob the problem. Get into the same room if you can, or a Zoom call, and start exploring the software together. Gather information and investigate as a team. Somebody popping up and saying, no, 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 go here instead, might be the very thing that you needed to go, oh, that's what's happening. Right? New eyes on the problem can only bring more little morsels of information to us. And it's with that insight that we can find our root cause. Working together is when we get the full picture, and we see all those beautiful patterns coming up, and things that help you narrow down your search until you find your necromancer in the code, causing the recurring bug to just pop up and cause all of your problems. And it takes much less time doing it together than it does individually. By working together earlier in the process and doing that, shift left, which is not a phrase I actually like, by the way, we get to rely on each other's skill set. And opening up those lines of communication, it didn't matter if we were slaying a necromancer or squashing a recurring bug. There's always great rejoicing. And it's been my experience that when you have a really good sprint, the next few sprints are usually pretty good too. The experience might even leave you with a new skill set or a new tool in your toolbox that you didn't even know you would have. This is actually the easiest, lowest effort to grow and evolve your own character. Not just your D&D character. They might get extra experience points for an encounter. Unfortunately, you don't run on experience points. You don't get to level up the same way. But as devs, there's usually not a lot of time for us to hop on Udemy or take a couple of Coursera classes. I don't know about you, but I have to beg, borrow, and steal to come to conferences, right? And I'm the speaker. So remember that you already have resources on your team. And if you're one of those people like me who works on a very small team, you might have resources in your greater community, right? In the Slack channel that you just joined or at a conference you just attended. The most significant way to become the better partner in your team is by investing in yourself. So at the D&D table, every session or encounter has that opportunity to give you your character experience points. I used my experience points and invested in new skills because my rogue was the least roguey rogue on the planet. I had really bad dice, guys. It's when you roll a 1 on everything rogues are supposed to do. She never learned to stealth or disarm traps very well. My dice just weren't in it. But after gaining enough experience points, I picked up a multi-class, and I learned magic with her. In the game, this translated to me picking up skills from the wizard class, but in our story, it really was the wizard who kind of took pity on me and taught me a few things. It took a lot of leveling up and a lot of fighting my way through some tough scenarios to get the skills that I wanted to have. But eventually, I ended up with a great skill set, and it served not only my character, but my party really well. I ended up playing her for almost 7 years. As a test automation engineer, I've had to learn a lot of things that may or may not be useful outside of DevOps. I can tell you just about anything you want to know about HVAC systems and what motor needs to be on a certain fan. I can tell you how heart monitors read the different electrical systems. That meant I also got to learn a lot of different programming languages and master none of them. It means I got to use a lot of different tools and master none of them. A great example is when I first moved into manual testing from automation. I'd never coded in the language before, but I knew how the tests needed to be set up. So I grabbed one of my devs that had that rare moment of free time, and they sat down with me, and we built out all the framework together. We Googled a lot, because of course I asked questions that he was like, I don't know, I'm not a tester. But between the two of us, we built this thing piece by piece, and it's still being used today, 10 years later. Something that I once felt was so incredibly out of reach for me is now something I literally do in my sleep. I dream about it. It's probably burnout, but that's a different talk. The more I learned, the fewer questions I had to ask, and that meant that all of a sudden people were coming to me with questions, and it felt good to give back. When you don't have the skills and resources on your team, and when you struggle with a task that your immediate team can't help with, please reach out to your community. Since I've joined the DevOps or the DevRel side of the world, I've realized how much community really is important to me. When the power of community shines through, you get to level yourself up. You're helping other people shine as well. There are Slack and Discord communities for every interest and tool under the sun. Please don't be like me. I think I have 36 Slack communities. It's insane. You cannot keep up with that many. And I've never been a big social media fan, but as Jason said before, it has a huge impact on our pathways. I can't tell you how many things I've learned because I stumbled across them on Twitter or LinkedIn and went, oh, I'm going to read more about that. So follow your favorite experts and your favorite speakers. Introduce them to other people so that they can follow them too. Twitter Spaces used to be great. They suck now. But reach out to the communities and be active as you would want to be at the D&D table. Click. Aha. So having conversations with a group of people helps us expand our minds. It shows us things that we would never have been exposed to before. If you're on the dev side, don't discount joining testing communities or DevOps communities or agile water coolers. If you're in the QA realm, devs aren't that bad. If you're a PO, mingle with the little people. We're not that scary. Sometimes you have to gain more experience before you fight the big bad. And slaying the big bad is a wonderful thing. Plus, there's usually a reward involved, right? We get experience, gold, treasures, and it's not like that in the real world. Often the appreciation of a job well done just disappears as you go on to the next release. And if you're anything like my teams, we're having more and more of them every day. So take the time to reward your teams. It might be their own version of gold and treasures. It's not always about a promotion or salary increase either. Send thank you notes, like old-fashioned thank you notes. Bring donuts to that early morning meeting. In a 2-year study from Deloitte, 3/4 of professionals said a simple thank you is all it takes to make them feel recognized. We don't need pizza parties or snacks in the break room, right? We just need somebody to say, wow, that was really amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. 41% of people said that they would actually like more recognition like that from their immediate peers. Not their boss, but the people on their teams. And according to Gallup, in 2021, couldn't find an updated version, 75% of people who say their teams receive praise also strongly agree that they have a feeling that what they do at work is valuable and useful. And it reinforces that team's sense of purpose. It also has been found to have an added bonus of kind of knocking down that burnout level just a little bit. I mean, like, you should still take care of yourself. But when you feel valued, it's not as bad as when you don't, right? Double clicks. So when you feel connected to a purpose, the end of each sprint looks a little bit more like a victory and less like a stressful all-nighter just to meet a deadline. It's so easy to get wrapped up in work and the fast delivery cycles, but make sure you set aside a small slice of time to invest in your own skills. Engage with social media, maybe a little bit more. Take that with a grain of salt if you're addicted. And say thank you to your team members and your community who are helping you grow. So, in that spirit, I want to say thank you so much to everybody that's managed to come out here today. I know that I am not local. I grew up here, but I'm not local, so traveling out here was an ordeal. But thank you for the sponsors and the team that's put it together, and for all of you for being here, letting me get up here and ramble about Dungeons and Dragons. I hope that you get involved in your next meeting and that you can listen to as many voices as humanly possible. And don't forget, RCA doesn't have to be like a sad solo slog. You can actually get your teammates to help you hunt down the bad guy. So, this is my link. You can find me on, pretty much any social media. I am addicted. But I would love to connect with you guys. I love to hear your stories and what tools you're using and build up my skill sets and level up my character too. So I hope you get to do the same. Thank you guys.